Hello, I'm Jeff Morisette, Chief Scientist with the National Invasive Species Council. And this talk is being given by me, but with help from Stas Burgel, the Executive Director, and Kelsey Brantley, Operations Director for staff to the National Invasive Species Council. It's within the session on translational invasion ecology. Thanks much to Tony Limorelli for organizing this session and inviting us to participate. I'm interested in seeing the other talks and happy to share the information here with you. So the talk will kind of give an institutional context for the National Invasive Species Council, and then talk about kind of this early detection rapid response coordination and how this translational ecology is happening within the 6 elements of our 2020 work plan. The purpose of NISC is to provide this vision and national leadership to coordinate across the prevention, eradication, and control of invasive species, as well as restoration activities. The National Invasive Species Council was established back in 1999, was renewed with some updates and adding some agencies in 2016, and persists here to this day. And we on the staff work on coordinating activities of these 12 federal agencies that make up the council and 4 White House offices. For the purposes of this talk, I think it's interesting to call out that the co-chair agencies, Department of Ag, Commerce, and that's mainly NOAA, and Interior, definitely have a foot in both camps, so to speak, with respect to research that's being done and responsibilities with respect to invasive species management. So that translational ecology is happening within those agencies. And what we try to do through our activities on the National Invasive Species Council and staff is to better understand what's happening across those 12 agencies and where, say, research in one can impact or inform management in the other, and where that management can inform or motivate research. And that's represented by this cycle. It's a graphic provided courtesy of David Lodge. We appreciate this, and that it shows kind of that cycle moving through a kind of cycle of somewhat translational ecology. And I like to kind of call out that this kind of goes on through time, and with that 20 years of the National Invasive Species Council or other federal agencies and federal commitments, you get sort of this long-term and sustained commitment, and that you go on through time, and that you can have that interaction from one agency to the other, where one agency or funding from an agency in an academic or other setting is motivating the knowledge, or is informing a policy management, but then another agency has some policy management that might inform what would need to be considered in a research domain. So kind of going through time, you hope to leverage and maximize the benefits of the 2 components and that iterative cycle through this. One of the ways we did this was earlier this year publishing a special issue of Biological Invasions focused on early detection rapid response. This was led by then Executive Director Jamie Reeser. And I think the take-home message of this special issue and this overview article, where this graphic is taken from, is that it's a fairly complex cycle, and it does iterate, and it's interconnected. So there's these components of early detection and rapid response, and that the articles then kind of go into the details of one or more of those elements and kind of provide nuances and details within those. And that overview article kind of talks about that interconnected and this need for an early detection and rapid response system across the federal government and the benefit of implementing such. So, building on that early detection rapid response special issue were 2 of the priority areas in our 2020 work plan. Those are more focused on the rapid response side of that EDRR equation. You'll see them listed there. There's 4 other elements. I'm going to walk through each of these relative to what we're doing in that action for 2020 and how this translational ecology research comes to the agency roles is looking at what funding authority, what management activities, and what partnering is available for early detection and rapid response. And it's breaking it down into these 3 stages and then 4 ongoing activities. And I think with this Safeguarding America's Lands and Waters from Invasive Species, which was an EDRR document from Department of Interior, as well as a special issue, special collection issue in biological invasions, there's a lot of research that's informing the monitoring, the activities to then do the management and the control, and then risk assessments. So there's quite a bit that can be informed from the research community with regard to early detection and, in this task item, that rapid response. And we are indeed looking to those papers to inform kind of this white paper that will come with this relative to what the agency's roles are with respect to rapid response. The emergency funding task in our 2020 work plan is probably a little bit more on the bureaucratic side and less connected in a translational ecology domain, and is looking at how, if and how a fund could be set up, looking to, what are other experiences across the federal government relative to maybe catastrophes or other emergencies where funds are available, and then sort of like, what would this look like? Scope, eligibility, application requirements. So some pragmatics about doing this. But here too, I think that, in a policy, economic policy, there's science that can inform these deliberations, and as well as, is this fund then kind of use, in that maybe the eligibility or application requirements is to ensure that the best available science is being taken advantage of. So that could be part of how this would proceed. The action item on invasive species and wildland fire is trying to connect these 2 communities. It's a joint initiative with the Wildland Fire Leadership Council, which is kind of parallel in that domain to the National Invasive Species Council. And it's looking at kind of how invasive species and fire kind of are now very complementary or kind of very interconnected, especially in some of the grassland fires. There's been a lot of research done in the sagebrush community relative to cheatgrass invasion, and this activity is considering these 5 points that you see there: preparing, response, and recovery. So preparing, keeping the invasives out or the flammable fuel low, how the response and recovery can keep that system from transitioning to a fully invaded ecosystem. But then here on the translational ecology side, information management, what tools are being done to share information in those 2 communities? How can they be better connected? And then research and development, just in general, is being considered by this activity. Where does fire research, fuels research, fire modeling relate to invasive species and invasive species modeling and spread? So there's a significant portion of this that is at that translational boundary between the research and the applied in that area. Here with environmental DNA, and this is extracting DNA from an environmental sample to see if there's any evidence of that species, is what we're thinking of with this targeted eDNA, species specific as opposed to community eDNA approaches, but at that intersection with invasive species. So the invasion curve here showing through time, and a species comes in and kind of gets harder and harder to control as it takes over into the area. That we want to recognize that environmental DNA is useful at that point, A, to ensure that a species hasn't come into the system, and then also kind of at that point between B and C, and then from C onward to ensure eradication has been effective and has persisted and the species has not come back into the system. So there's different areas in time or different points in time in the management cycle where eDNA can be used. eDNA is really pretty exciting, but relatively new in the context relative to science. It's been around for about 10 years. So there's been a lot that's been done in the research domain. We have kind of in a translational ecology set the work in the Great Lakes with Asian carp has moved to an operational monitoring phase, and it's built on that research, built on some lessons learned, and proceeding in a way that's setting an example of how it can be used in practice and operationally. And so part of this work, again, is generalizing what's going on there and in other places where it's being used and taking advantage of the research that's being done, but certainly recognizing, especially in this task item, that that research is ongoing and evolving. And so any use of eDNA by the management community needs to recognize that this is ongoing work, and that the research needs to be closely coupled with any use, and likewise any use should recognize the novel research that's proceeding. Advanced biotech is probably furthest on the research side of the research to operations spectrum. These are novel techniques. They can be controversial with respect to genetic modification or gene drives, and so this is actually just kind of making sure federal agencies and actors within the federal agencies considering such advanced biotech tools are communicating, and it's really kind of a community of practice, just trying to understand, what are the potential applications, understanding what the risks are, and then exploring where there might be some policy considerations and how to bring in that outreach and how to bring in the wider community through outreach, and doing that in a way that sort of ensures kind of effective and respectful in operationalizing of any of these techniques that might happen in the future. And finally, the cross-cut budget as our sixth item of the 2020 work plan. If you go to our website under what we do, go into cross-cut budget, you'll see that we break down what the federal agencies have spent, broken down by columns here across federal agencies, and then by category. And these numbers are in thousands, so the total is roughly $3 billion a year. And you'll see that EDRR is kind of about 10% of that, and showing it through time is consistently been about 10% of the federal budget that's spent on invasive species. So it's certainly an important part of what agencies are spending, what they're thinking about. And so to close, I think that this is an excellent session, this translational ecology, how it's connecting. And EDRR is certainly a big part of what federal agencies are doing. So like I said, I'm interested to hearing the other talks and appreciate the chance to share this with you. Please refer to any of the websites that were shown throughout the talk, or if you have any questions, feel free to write me. I'm in the middle there, Jeff. And again, thanks to Tony Lynn Morelli for organizing this session and for your attention as I walk through this, and hope everyone is staying safe and cautious and careful. And we'll look forward to actually seeing people in person at the next ESA meeting in 2021.